The lobby of the luxury hotel was buzzing with activity. Crystal chandeliers reflected off the polished marble floors, and the gentle murmur of well-dressed guests filled the air. The scent of fresh flowers and expensive cologne made the place feel untouchable. A world apart from ordinary life. Through the revolving doors walked a man. He wasn't flashy. His clothes were simple, almost unassuming, yet he carried himself with quiet confidence. He moved slowly, letting his eyes take in the elegance around him without showing any reaction. Most guests barely noticed him at first. Then it happened. A hotel staff member, standing near the reception desk, suddenly squared up and pointed directly at him. "Sir, stop right there," the staff shouted, his voice cutting through the hum of the lobby. "We saw you take something from the front desk." Guests froze mid-step. Conversations stopped. Forks were left on tables in the restaurant adjacent to the lobby. The accusation was loud, public, impossible to ignore. The man raised a hand slightly, not in defense, but as if to ask for a moment of calm. "Take something?" he repeated, his voice soft, controlled. The staff member sneered. "Don't play innocent. You think you can just walk in here and steal from us without consequence?" Whispers began to ripple through the lobby. People glanced at the man, curious. Some nodded in disbelief at the audacity of the accusation. Others tightened their grip on their handbags or phones, wondering what would happen next. The accused man said nothing. He didn't protest. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, quietly observing, his eyes calm but sharp. The tension in the room became almost physical. Guests leaned forward slightly in their chairs, or tilted their heads, trying to catch every movement. Even the staff began to feel a flicker of uncertainty. Something about this man didn't match the petty theft accusation. "Sir, you need to come with me to the manager," the staff insisted, voice now trembling slightly under the weight of the curious eyes around him. And in that moment, every single person in the lobby, the guests, the staff, the security, felt that a storm was coming. Something about this simple-looking man made everyone instinctively pause. He wasn't like the others who walked these halls. He wasn't ordinary, and while no one could know exactly why yet, they all felt that this confrontation would not end the way anyone expected. The hotel lobby was a showcase of wealth and taste. Polished marble floors stretched for what seemed like an endless corridor, reflecting the soft glow of crystal chandeliers overhead. The walls were adorned with priceless paintings, each framed in gold, and the subtle hum of classical music drifted from speakers tucked neatly into the ornate ceilings. Guests moved gracefully across the floor, their designer shoes barely making a sound, while concierge and bellboys scurried in perfect synchronization, attending to every whim. This was a place where appearances mattered more than anything else, where a polished smile and an expensive suit could earn immediate respect, and where even a single misstep could lead to humiliation. The hotel had a reputation for elite clientele, celebrities, business tycoons, and international dignitaries. And everyone here understood the unspoken rule. Your status defined you before your words did. The man from the lobby, calm, quiet, and dressed simply, stood at the edge of this world. His clothes were modest, nothing designer, nothing flashy. A plain jacket, a clean but simple shirt, and well-worn shoes. Yet there was something about him that drew attention, without him trying. A subtle confidence that didn't need labels or money to command presence. Guests started to notice the tension growing at the reception. Whispers flitted from table to table, soft enough to be polite, loud enough to carry curiosity. People leaned in toward one another. Some shook their heads in disbelief. Who is this man? They wondered. How could someone act so calm after being accused like that? At the same time, the staff tried to regain control. The hotel prided itself on perfection. Errors, accidents, and even perceived disrespect were intolerable. The lobby manager adjusted his tie nervously as he observed the scene. The accusation had already caused ripples through the polished environment, guests noticing, staff hesitating, and the usual hum of activity interrupted. In places like this, people are trained to judge immediately. Status, clothing, and confidence all play huge roles in how someone is treated. That's why a simple man, calm and composed, instantly makes people uneasy. It challenges the whole hierarchy. The staff were convinced they were right. To them, the man didn't belong here. His modest clothes, his quiet demeanor, his unassuming luggage, they all screamed outsider. And yet, for every accusation they made, they felt an undercurrent of doubt they couldn't articulate. Something about him didn't fit their usual expectations. Meanwhile, the guests' curiosity grew. Elegant women whispered into their companions' ears, tilting their heads to get a better look. A group of businessmen paused in the lobby, subtly observing the exchange between the staff and the man. Cameras were not out, but eyes were everywhere. Social cues spread quickly. Subtle nods, slight eyebrow raises, the kind of attention that silently said, "This isn't ordinary." The tension in the room wasn't just from the accusation. It was the contrast, the clash between the man's understated appearance and the opulent, rigid environment around him. Here, the hotel and its patrons were in full control of their world, used to perfection, routine, and hierarchy. And now, in a single moment, all of that seemed fragile. If you were in this man's place, standing in a room full of people judging you by how you look, what would you do? Stay calm like him, or argue back? As the seconds stretched, the man didn't move, didn't protest, didn't plead. He simply stood there, observing. His calm was deliberate. It was as if he understood the environment more than anyone else, more than the staff, more than the guests, and that calm, that quiet patience, made the people around him increasingly uneasy. Every detail in the lobby seemed amplified. The shine of the marble, the sparkle of the chandeliers, the meticulous uniforms of the staff. Each item, each guest, each gesture became part of a larger contrast. The man was ordinary on the surface, yet every reaction in the room hinted at something extraordinary beneath. Even the hotel staff, confident and trained to maintain authority, found themselves second-guessing. The man's silence was unsettling. In a place where power was usually measured in wealth and reputation, this quiet figure disrupted everything. They couldn't predict what would happen next, and that uncertainty made them anxious. Human. By the time the manager finally approached, tension had rippled through the entire lobby. Guests shifted in their seats, staff glanced nervously at one another, and the man remained as calm as ever, quietly holding their attention without a single word. The stage was set. The elite environment, the accusations, the whispers of the guests, all combined to create a pressure cooker ready to explode. And at the center of it all stood a man who, on the surface, appeared completely ordinary. Yet even in his simplicity, he carried a presence that hinted this confrontation would not end in the way anyone expected. The lobby, previously filled with soft murmurs and polite activity, suddenly became a stage for confrontation. The staff member who had first accused the man now stepped forward, with his chest puffed out, eyes narrowed, voice booming across the polished marble hall. "Sir," he shouted again, pointing an accusatory finger at the man. "We saw you. You took something that doesn't belong to you." The simplicity of the man's outfit now seemed to inflame the staff's judgment. His plain jacket, his modest shoes, his quietly confident posture. Everything about him screamed outsider in this hyper-polished environment. In the eyes of the hotel employee, appearances were everything. And by that measure, this man was guilty. Other staff members began to gather around, forming a subtle semicircle that isolated the man from the rest of the lobby. Their body language was rigid, defensive, and a little theatrical, designed not just to accuse, but to humiliate publicly. They believed in the power of social pressure. The louder and more dramatic the accusation, the more likely bystanders would side with them. Stop trying to act innocent. Another staff member barked, stepping closer. We saw you at the reception desk. That wallet. Where is it? The audience of guests could no longer ignore what was happening. Heads turned, whispers spread, and smartphones were discreetly raised to capture the unfolding drama. Some of the onlookers shook their heads in disbelief, while others exchanged uneasy glances. It was rare to witness such a blatant confrontation in a place so controlled, so curated, so polished. The staff believed they were in control. They were trained to respond to theft quickly and decisively. Their arrogance was fueled by habit. In this environment, they were often correct. They had authority, they had protocol, and they had the support of the hotel's prestige. But there was one thing they didn't account for: the quiet confidence of the man standing before them. He said nothing. He didn't flinch, didn't raise his hands in defense, didn't look flustered. Instead, he let the accusations flow over him like water. He simply watched, his gaze steady, calm and unwavering. Every sarcastic remark, every dramatic gesture from the staff seemed to bounce off him harmlessly, and the longer this continued, the more the staff's frustration grew. Are you even listening to me? The first staff member snapped, his face reddening. Do you think you can just walk around stealing from us without consequence? Guests began to notice a subtle shift. What should have been a routine accusation was now awkward. The staff's performance, meant to establish dominance, was faltering. The man's silence, combined with his quiet presence, was creating a sense of doubt in everyone watching. People whispered among themselves, "Why isn't he scared? Why doesn't he react?" When someone doesn't respond to anger or humiliation, it can be more unsettling than fighting back. People expect reactions, and when they don't get one, it breaks their confidence instead of yours. The staff were now desperate to regain control. One of them grabbed the man's arm, not roughly, but with a firmness intended to intimidate. "Come with me to the manager," he said, his voice slightly shaking now. The gesture, meant to assert power, only amplified the tension. Every guest in the lobby was watching, every eye silently asking, "Who is this man? Why isn't he afraid?" The semicircle of staff members became almost comical in their desperation. Their gestures grew louder, their accusations more elaborate, their attempts at authority increasingly strained. Yet still, the man said nothing. No excuses, no threats, no anger, only calm, measured observation. Some guests began to notice the subtle cracks in the staff's confidence. A concierge hesitated in the background, unsure whether to intervene. Another guest leaned over to their companion and whispered, "He doesn't look like anyone who would steal anything. Something's off." The lobby manager, sensing the growing unease, tried to intervene from a distance. He gestured to the staff to remain calm, but it was already too late. The longer the confrontation continued, the more everyone, staff and guests alike, felt that this was no ordinary accusation. Something about the man defied the rules of this polished elite environment. And yet, the staff pressed on, their arrogance now mixed with tension. They still believed they were right. They still assumed that appearances alone could define guilt. But the simple, quiet man in front of them was slowly, subtly turning the table without a single word. Every sarcastic remark, every shouted accusation, every dramatic gesture from the staff only heightened the suspense. The audience, fully engaged now, leaned in closer. They could feel the imbalance. The man was ordinary by appearance, but extraordinary in presence. And the staff, once confident and in control, were beginning to crumble under the weight of their own misjudgment. By the end of this scene, the lobby was charged with tension. Every whispered comment, every sideways glance, every small movement in the room added to the feeling that something huge was about to happen. And all the while, the man simply stood there. Silent, calm, and unshakable, silently preparing the stage for what was about to come next. The lobby, once a stage for the staff's arrogance, now felt charged with an almost electric tension. Every eye in the room was fixed on the man at the center, yet he said nothing. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain himself. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he stood quietly, shoulders relaxed, eyes scanning the room with a subtle but intense focus. The staff had expected fear, hesitation, or at least some defensive response. That's what they were used to. Accusations like these almost always cause someone to stumble, to panic, to falter. But not this man. Not him. His calm was deliberate. Every small movement, every glance, every blink was controlled, almost measured. It was unnerving. The first staff member, still pointing aggressively, began to notice the effect his own gestures had, or rather, didn't have. The man's gaze didn't waver. The corner of his mouth didn't twitch. There was no hint of anger, no trace of guilt, nothing that could be used against him. It was as if the staff member had suddenly become the one under scrutiny, exposed in his own arrogance. Guests began to lean forward slightly in their seats, trying to understand the silent drama unfolding before them. Some whispered to each other, curiosity growing with each passing second. "Why isn't he responding?" One whispered, tilting her head. "I don't know," her companion replied, "but it's like he's completely in control, even though he's quiet." The quietness was its own kind of power. In a world where shouting, arguing, and dramatic gestures usually commanded attention, his calm dominance was a shock. The more the staff tried to provoke him, the more tense they became. Their words, meant to humiliate, instead seemed empty. When someone stays calm under pressure, it forces others to reveal themselves. People expect reactions. They want confirmation of guilt, fear, or weakness. Without it, your presence alone can shift the balance of power. The man shifted slightly, just enough to adjust his jacket. That tiny, subtle movement carried authority. Every guest in the lobby noticed. Every staff member began to hesitate. Even those who had been confident in their accusations now felt a creeping doubt. The staff member's voice, once booming, now trembled slightly. "Sir, are you going to say something?" he demanded, though his tone lacked its earlier certainty. The man's eyes, calm and unwavering, scanned the room. A single glance toward the gathered guests carried more weight than any shouted accusation. It was as if the room itself recognized him, even if the staff did not yet. Whispers grew louder. Some guests exchanged glances filled with curiosity and awe. Others felt embarrassed for the staff, sensing that the accusers might be overstepping boundaries they could never recover from. The subtle tension created a strange rhythm. Each moment of silence from the man stretched longer. Each failed provocation from the staff made the atmosphere heavier. People began to notice small details, the way he stood balanced and relaxed, the slight narrowing of his eyes as if measuring the room, the way his calmness seemed to seep into the space around him. If you were watching this, would you feel nervous for the staff or curious about the man's calm? Why do you think calm can feel more intimidating than anger? The staff, desperate to regain control, tried a different tactic. One leaned closer, voice low but sharp. "We don't have time for games. Answer me. Where's the wallet you took?" Still nothing. The lobby seemed to hold its breath. The guests, the staff, even the manager in the background, everyone felt the weight of the silence. It was as if time itself had slowed. And in that silence, the man's power was unmistakable. He did not need to shout, to argue, to threaten. His mere presence commanded attention, demanded respect, and quietly dismantled the staff's authority. It was clear to anyone watching that something was off. This was no ordinary confrontation. This was a subtle battle of presence versus arrogance, of calm versus impulsive judgment. And with every passing second, the staff's confidence weakened. Power doesn't always come from noise or force. Sometimes the quiet, steady presence of someone confident makes others reveal their insecurity and mistakes. By the end of this part, the staff were visibly uncomfortable. Fingers that had once pointed aggressively now wavered. Voices that had been loud and accusing now faltered. Guests leaned closer, whispering and exchanging knowing looks. The room had shifted. The tension had reached its peak, and through it all, the man, silent, calm, composed, remained the center of attention, preparing the stage for the inevitable reveal that would leave everyone in shock. The lobby had shifted from a bustling hub of luxury to a quiet arena of tension. The staff, once confident and commanding, now hesitated. Their accusations, meant to humiliate, had lost power against the calm, quiet figure standing in front of them. Every gesture, every word, every accusation now seemed smaller, weaker. Guests, once polite and detached, now leaned in subtly. Some paused mid-step. Some set down champagne glasses or phones, all drawn by the electric tension filling the room. Whispers flowed through the lobby like a current. Who is this man? He doesn't even look fazed. Why isn't he answering? Even the bellboys and concierges, usually the perfect model of efficiency, felt an unusual unease. Their movements became more careful, less assured. The staff member who had initially made the accusation tugged at his uniform sleeve nervously, and the security guard shifted his weight from one foot to another. The lobby manager had finally approached, but even he seemed unsure. He signaled subtly to the staff to calm down, but they barely noticed. The attention was no longer on protocol or procedure. It was on the man, whose presence was quietly dominating the room. The man continued to remain still, his expression unreadable, his posture relaxed yet undeniably confident. He didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. And that calmness, that quiet assurance, made the staff increasingly desperate. When someone doesn't react to pressure, it forces everyone else to reveal their own insecurities. Calmness becomes a mirror showing weakness in others. Guests began noticing small details. The way the staff member's finger wavered mid-accusation, the subtle tightening of another's jaw, the slight hesitation in every gesture. Even a seemingly minor misstep, like a dropped pen or a stammered word, suddenly felt amplified. Some guests whispered to one another, sharing theories. He must be someone important. Maybe a celebrity? No one stays that calm if they've stolen something. Others felt embarrassed for the staff, recognizing the disconnect between accusation and reality. The air in the lobby was heavy. Every movement seemed charged. Guests leaned forward in their seats, curious and tense. Some shifted weight nervously, clearly caught between fascination and discomfort. The atmosphere was a mix of suspense, awe, and a growing anticipation of what would happen next. The staff, sensing the shift, tried to regain control. "Sir, please answer us," one yelled, voice cracking slightly. "You need to come with us to the manager," but still, no reaction. The silence was deafening. It amplified the suspense. It forced every eye in the room to stay on the man, analyzing every micro-expression, every subtle gesture, every blink. And slowly, doubt began to creep into the minds of the accusers themselves. If you were a guest in the room watching this unfold, would you side with the staff? Or would you start doubting them? Why do you think everyone was watching so closely? The longer the silence stretched, the more the social dynamics in the room shifted. Guests began to sense that this man was not ordinary. There was a quiet authority about him, a presence that demanded attention without a single raised voice. Even the staff who had been so sure of themselves were now second-guessing every decision, every word, every accusation. The whispers grew louder, though still hushed. People exchanged glances, wondering what would happen next. Some leaned closer to overhear the staff's accusations, others leaned back, as if giving space to the quiet man to assert himself. Every glance, Every subtle movement heightened the drama in the lobby. The lobby manager stepped forward again, clearing his throat, trying to regain control over the spiraling scene. Yet even his authority seemed diminished. The man's calm had reshaped the energy in the room. Guests and staff alike were now on edge, anticipating the moment when the truth would be revealed. The tension was no longer just about the accusation. It was about perception, power, and presence. Everyone in the room could feel it. The lobby had become a stage, and the quiet man was commanding attention without saying a word. People are naturally drawn to confidence and presence. When someone seems untouchable, it makes everyone else hyper-aware of their own actions. By the end of this part, the staff were visibly unsettled, the guests fully engaged, and the lobby had transformed into a space charged with suspense. The stage was perfectly set for the manager to finally step forward and deliver the shocking reveal that would leave everyone stunned. The quiet calm of the man, the wavering confidence of the staff, and the captivated attention of the witnesses, everything was in place. And in a few moments, the balance of power in the lobby would shift completely. The tension in the lobby had reached a boiling point. Every whisper, every hesitant glance, every subtle shift of weight carried weight. Guests leaned in, captivated, their curiosity now tinged with awe. The staff, once confident in their accusations, were visibly faltering, caught between duty, embarrassment, and the strange sense that something was off. The lobby manager finally stepped forward. His movements were deliberate but cautious. He adjusted his tie, cleared his throat, and looked around the room, sensing the collective focus now on the quiet man at the center. His eyes met those of the accusers. They flinched slightly under the weight of his gaze. Even they could feel that the confrontation had spun far beyond what they expected. "Sir," the manager began, his voice steady but low, almost reverent. He paused, glancing at the guests around him before continuing. "Sir, you are Steven Seagal?" The staff froze instantly. The words hung in the air like an explosion waiting to detonate. The lobby seemed to hold its breath. Guests gasped. Some hands flew to mouths in disbelief. Others leaned back slowly, their eyes wide. Every corner of the room was charged with shock. The man, the same quiet, calm, composed figure, nodded ever so slightly. Not triumphantly, not arrogantly, just a small, subtle acknowledgement, as if confirming a fact that was obvious to him, but had taken everyone else by surprise. For the staff, time seemed to stop. The first accuser's finger, which had been pointed aggressively just seconds ago, hung mid-air. The staff member's jaw slackened. His face went pale. Every word they had shouted, every gesture meant to intimidate, now felt hollow and foolish. The hotel's elite lobby, once a space where appearances ruled, had witnessed an instantaneous shift in power. Guests whispered among themselves, trying to process what had just happened. Some shook their heads slowly. He owns this hotel? He never said a word, and yet everyone else just. Their murmurs reflected the same thought. The man who had seemed so simple, so ordinary, was in fact the very person who held authority over the entire establishment. Even the hotel manager, who had been cautious in approaching the situation, now seemed almost relieved to announce the truth. He stepped closer to the staff, his tone softening. "Everyone, this is the owner. You were mistaken. Please, handle this respectfully." The staff looked around helplessly. Eyes darted from the guests to the man, then back to each other. Any attempt to regain composure felt forced. Some lowered their heads, silently acknowledging their error. Others glanced at the manager, hoping for guidance on how to recover from the embarrassment. This moment shows how quickly perception can flip. Someone underestimated can hold far more power than those who assumed authority over them. Silence and calm can make arrogance collapse. The guests who had been silently observing the drama now looked on with awe and admiration. A sense of justice had been served in real time, not through confrontation or yelling, but through calm composure and quiet authority. The lobby, once tense and chaotic, slowly began to regain its rhythm. But the lesson of the moment lingered in the air. The man, Seagal, didn't celebrate. He didn't gloat. He simply stood there, calm, as though the situation had always been under his control. The staff, now humbled, took a step back. Some apologized quietly. Others offered respectful nods, still processing the revelation. Have you ever misjudged someone based on their appearance? How would you feel if you realized someone you underestimated actually held all the power? The subtle power shift was undeniable. Where once the staff held the confidence and authority, now the quiet, composed man commanded the room without saying a word. He had dismantled arrogance, corrected a false judgment, and done so with poise. Guests continued to whisper, some smiling knowingly, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The manager spoke once more, addressing everyone in the lobby. Let this be a reminder. Judgment based on appearances can be misleading. Respect is earned, not assumed. The lobby slowly returned to its usual activity, but the memory of the moment would linger. Every guest and every staff member would remember the day a simple-looking man, calm and silent, revealed himself as the owner, completely upending assumptions and teaching a subtle but powerful lesson about perception, authority, and respect. The reveal works because it's unexpected, yet inevitable. People love seeing a reversal of assumptions, especially when arrogance is humbled and calm authority wins. And just like that, the tension that had gripped the lobby for minutes felt like hours. The staff learned a humbling lesson. The guests had witnessed a quiet display of dominance and wisdom. And at the center of it all stood a man who had never needed to shout, argue, or assert himself loudly. Someone who simply let the truth and his presence do all the work. The lobby had returned to its usual rhythm, but the energy had changed. Guests resumed their conversations, yet the whispers persisted, not of gossip, but of awe and reflection. Staff members moved with caution, no longer the confident authority figures they had been just moments ago. Every action carried a new awareness, a newfound respect for the quiet man who had upended their assumptions without lifting a finger. Seagal stood in the center of it all, calm and composed, his posture relaxed, his expression neutral. He didn't need applause. He didn't need to gloat. The room itself seemed to recognize that the lesson had been delivered, quietly and effectively. He finally spoke, his voice calm but firm, measured and deliberate. Respect is not given because of your title, your uniform, or your position, he said. It is earned through understanding, humility, and the way you treat others. The staff, still recovering from the shock of their misjudgment, listened carefully. They had been so focused on appearances, so certain of their authority, that they hadn't stopped to consider that their assumption might be wrong. Now, they realized how fragile arrogance could be when confronted with quiet confidence. This is the core lesson. Judging someone by appearance or status is the weakest form of arrogance. True authority is shown through calm, respect, and presence, not shouting or forcing control. One of the staff members, still visibly shaken, nodded slowly. Others whispered apologies, not out of fear, but genuine recognition of their error. The guests, too, watched with fascination. They had witnessed something rare, a complete reversal of assumptions, where humility and quiet strength triumphed over arrogance and judgment. Seagal continued, addressing both the staff and the guests. You don't need power to demand respect. You don't need anger to correct injustice. Sometimes, the greatest influence comes from simply standing firm, calm, and true to yourself. His words were simple, yet carried weight. The elegance of the hotel, the luxury of the environment, and the pride of the staff, all of it faded in comparison to the lesson he had just delivered. Silence followed, but it was no longer tense. It was reflective, almost reverent. Guests whispered among themselves, commenting not on the initial accusation, but on the lesson it had revealed. That was incredible. He didn't yell or fight, yet everyone respected him instantly. It's amazing how calmness can hold so much power, The social dynamic had shifted. The lobby was still luxurious, still polished, but it now held a new sense of perspective. Have you ever had to stay calm in a situation where others underestimated you? How did it change the way people treated you? The staff began to move more carefully, aware that their behavior had consequences beyond just protocol. They understood that true authority was not about raising your voice or asserting dominance over someone else. It was about observing, listening, and responding with wisdom. Seagal's calm demeanor had done more than silence a false accusation. It had reminded everyone present that arrogance can collapse in an instant when confronted with patience and quiet authority. Power is not about proving yourself over others. It's about embodying respect and consistency in every action. This ending resonates because it shows justice delivered without conflict. People feel satisfaction and inspiration when arrogance is humbled and humility prevails. As the lobby slowly returned to normal, a subtle sense of relief mixed with respect filled the air. Guests continued their visits, staff resumed their duties, but no one forgot the lesson they had witnessed firsthand. A simple man, quiet and calm, had shown that respect and authority do not require shouting, anger, or dominance. They require presence, patience, and integrity. And so, the hotel, the staff, and the guests were left with a story they would tell for years. Not about a theft that never happened, not about the embarrassment of the staff, but about the quiet, calm figure who stood at the center of it all and taught an unforgettable lesson about respect, humility, and the real meaning of power. In the end, everyone left inspired, quietly reflecting on their own assumptions, ready to treat others with more thoughtfulness, and reminded that judging someone without knowing the full story is the truest form of weakness.